It's been a while since we talked, so let's talk. We'll start with Fury versus Usyk, the second fight, and then we'll do a lot of talking about that because that's the undisputed heavyweight fight, and then we'll talk about legacy and certain fighters that I want to talk about, including the current one. Then I'll talk about some stuff related to the channel down the line. All right, so first things first. I think most people walking away from the first fight, if they didn't know it going into the first fight, I think we all kind of knew that Fury wasn't the better boxer last time. I say kind of, hopefully there's no kind of to it. When I did the full extended round by round, punch by punch breakdown of the first fight, it was obvious just how much further ahead Usyk was in terms of hitting and not getting hit, and that's what Fury was lauded for. That's what he was praised for, being like a big 6'9" Muhammad Ali. That's where he always got the comparisons to. But there's levels in that regard, and Usyk is a level or two above him when it comes to just pure boxing ability. And you could say Fury's old and past his prime, but Usyk is also older. But when you're bigger like Fury, you do probably age a little bit more drastically. But then at the same time, you have to account for the fact that Usyk's style is heavily reliant on speed and athleticism, so that would make it hard for him to age up too. But regardless, he wasn't the better boxer last time. Fury was not. He wasn't going to be the better boxer this time. I think people were interested in the probability of this fight going Fury's way because they knew that Fury would come in looking to bruise, looking to bang, looking to hurt Usyk, and that's what he said. And he put on weight, and he did a similar thing with Deontay Wilder in the second fight. But one of the weird things about praising Fury for his ability to win rematches is it's all built off of Wilder for the most part. And Wilder is Wilder. Wilder is dangerous, but it's not a insane feat to bully Wilder, as we've come to see over these past few years. So Fury's going in there trying to hurt Usyk, and to be honest, watching that fight, both were coming in with bad intentions. Fury was setting up the right hand or uppercut at times, and Usyk was setting up the left hand. Usyk was starting early, trying to work off of the level change. Jab to the body, cross to the body, so he can come over top and blast the left hand. He was doing that quick in the first round, which lets me know that he was trying to also hurt Fury. So both of them came in there with bad intentions. Usyk is just, we don't put him in that box, and so people don't really talk about when he's trying to hurt somebody. But yeah, he was trying to hurt Fury in those early rounds also. Now, Fury, watching the flow of this fight was interesting because Fury had some opportunities to start gaining control of it. There's a few things Fury did in this fight that was a little bit bewildering to me, like some advantages he could have pressed on or some adjustments he could have made. But I think one of the major reasons those adjustments didn't happen is because he kind of gassed out halfway through the fight. But we'll get there. Fury's jab can be a problem for Usyk. It really can. It was a problem at times in the first fight. It was a problem at times in the second fight. But it's a real problem when he triples or quadruples the jab, double scribble, so he's multiplying the jab. When he was just throwing out singular ones, Usyk was kind of like getting away. Usyk does a real slick move where he just barely gets his head off the center line to avoid that jab. It's a subtle little defensive maneuver that was getting out of the way of most of the single jabs that Fury was throwing. But with Fury's jab, he likes to step in with that feint and kind of twitch a little bit and then throw it out. And he can reset Usyk with that, but I think it was hard for him I think he came in not knowing exactly what he wanted to do. Like, the general idea was, I want to hurt him, probably hit him with an uppercut because that worked last time. But the path to get there, I don't think that was really laid out. So I think he had like a general idea of what he wanted to do, but I don't think he had any specifics. And so he was kind of just improvising on the spot. And Usyk is kind of like B-Raw in the sense that we know exactly what they're gonna do. We know what their fight is gonna look like. When Usyk is fighting, you know exactly what it's gonna look like. But there's so much variety within that box that they're in. You know that they're in a box, but there's a lot that they do within that box, and they adapt, and the fights in general look very similar from their perspective, from what they're doing, but there's small micro adjustments that they do depending on the circumstance and depending on the fighter, and that's what makes them great. But Usyk was doing what he does. The way he was fighting looked very similar to the first fight because he didn't have to do much. Fury was kind of there just to be touched up. One thing about Fury's approach, though, surprisingly, because he's known from having his hands down and moving around using his feet, I think Fury would have been better off working behind a high guard, because I saw him walking forward confidently behind a high guard and pushing Usyk back. Now, it's not to say that that would have worked perfectly for a long extended period of time, but the problem is when he has his hands down, he's, shucking and jiving and moving it and all of that. That works great for the opponents he used to fight, which is the big slow heavyweights of the modern day boxing heavyweight scene. It doesn't work well for smooth, quick, great, technical, fast, athletic, smaller heavyweights like Usyk and other heavyweights in the past that have given him problems, like Wilder, who's not a lot of the things I just described, but he is very fast, and the speed is an issue because you don't get away with the reflexes and the smoothness because them shots are coming way faster, so you can't react in time. I think it was much easier for Fury because think about fighters that take that bullying approach, that take that pressure fighting approach. Very few of them walk forward with their hands down. It's not a good idea because you're walking into the line of fire and you don't have any cover, basically. But when he would put up that high guard, he could kind of turn with some shots, which he's already good at. So if he has a high guard, he's turning with some shots instead of walking forward and then running into stuff like how you just saw right there. I mean, that's what got him in trouble. There was a couple moments in this fight that looked very similar to this. The difference is, I think he was seeing that left hand coming just in time, but he was walking forward with his hands down, throwing the combo, chin up in the air, and Usyk would boom, try and blast him with that left overhand. And it was a few times it looked exactly like that moment in the 9th round that almost had him out. But yeah, I think with a high guard, more emphasis on the body shots, multiplying the jab, Fury can actually put up a much better fight than he did. And I don't know how to think about which one of these fights was. I think that the second fight was just an even more clean victory from Usyk, because Fury in like the middle rounds, he was non-existent. He was non-existent, and I think it was him being extra fat, but that's really what it was. It's not like he put on a bunch of muscle to be 281. I think he ate a few extra cheesecakes or whatever, and him being 281, that's the real thing with weight. When you increase your weight, the cardio, in my opinion, just personal experience, the cardio is one of the things that becomes more difficult in general, no matter what you're doing athletically, but especially if you're boxing. The cardio is going to be one of the first things that takes a hit, because everything you're doing is more expensive. This fight had more medium moments and big exchanges, but less shocking moments. And this fight also had more slow periods. So when comparing the first fight and the second fight, the first fight, there were, a moment or two, I think in, around the 6th round, where Fury looked like he might start going down the path of stopping Usyk, like when he had Usyk hurt pretty bad. And then there was also a moment in the 9th round for Usyk where he almost stopped Tyson Fury. So there was more drama in the first fight. In this second fight, it was slower paced. Fury didn't put his foot on the gas as much across most of the fight. I don't know. It's weird because I feel like he had more foot pressure, like he walked forward more. But as far as volume, I don't know. And again, the volume is going to suffer because he's so much heavier. But I think the game plan generally was try and set up a big shot. But general and specifics, sometimes they collide when you're in the moment and you realize that maybe we should have ironed out the specifics a little bit more. Or maybe even if you iron out the specifics, it's different when you're in there. So even if you have like a detailed game plan, when Usyk starts putting that lead hand all up in your face and walking you down and not giving you a chance to breathe, and you 281, you know, it can happen like that. But this fight did have a lot of moments where they were just exchanging, throwing combos back and forth at each other, and you know, those were interesting, even though most of it wasn't landing because both of them have, you know, good defense. Yeah, but those middle rounds, Fury, it was like 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9, but I think he started coming back in the 9th. Yeah, he was just frozen for those rounds, like almost nothing in those rounds. And another thing that was surprising, Usyk was constantly working off of the level change. I feel like even more so than in the first fight. Like he was just constantly level change jab to the body, level change cross to the body, level change overhand left. Like that was what Usyk was doing the entire night for the most part. He added a few little spices in there to, you know, mix it up, like a right hook to catch him exiting to the left, but or to Usyk's right, I should say. But Usyk was working off the level change so much that I was surprised that Fury wasn't doing too much about that. Like he kind of had some adaptations with the outside movement of Usyk, where he wants to go around Fury's left shoulder. Fury would throw that slapping left hook, which I don't know why he didn't throw more of, because every time he was consistently throwing that, it was throwing Usyk off, and it's a weird shot. It's long, it's rangy, it's slappy, it's unpredictable. I think I talked about that leading up to the first fight. I was like, that slappy left hook can be a big deal. It never really was a big deal because Fury never really used it. But I mean, and right now it kind of sounds like I'm saying Fury could have won if he did this and that. But like how I said, really, when the Ngannou fight happened with Fury, I remember making a video, and because I already believed for a while up until that point that Usyk would just completely outbox Fury. I believed that. The only thing that changed my mind leading up to the first fight that made me go with Fury over Usyk is I thought Fury would approach Usyk more so like how he did in the second fight, but with the intensity of the first fight, if that makes any sense. So more of a bullying, power punching approach, but with more energy and just more willingness to push the pace. I feel like I don't know what he was thinking, but somehow he thinks he won the fight, which is, you know, what can you do, right? He's not known for, you know, being in touch with reality too well. So, well, I mean, what can you do? At least you can say Happy New Year this time, and it fits. But where was I going? Yeah, the level change. I'm like, why is he not adapting to the level change? He was adapting a little bit to the outside movement, like I said, but the only thing he really had was the uppercut. Like he would just spam the uppercut, but the uppercut was missing because Usyk is smooth enough to not just come straight in, but come straight in and get his head off the center line simultaneously. So when he level changes and gets low, he's not coming in on a straight line. He's getting off to the side a little bit. So that uppercut isn't, you know, in line with where Usyk was supposed to be because he changed where he was. But even still, Fury, like, yeah, the uppercut was about the only thing he had to the level change. And since Usyk was allowed to keep level changing, he just smoked them. The AI, I believe, scored the fight like 118, 112 or something like that. Like, it's not even close. And one important thing about this fight is there was a lot of talk about the probability of non-impartial judging because they were in Saudi Arabia, I believe, and Turkey was, you know, talking crazy about how I can't remember all the stuff he was saying in that video, but Turkey was like, oh, we're going to have rabbit stew and blah blah blah. Yeah, he was talking crazy to Usyk, and he was favoring Fury, and so people were like, oh, so that they can have the trilogy, the judges are going to be unfair and, you know, give the fight to Fury even if Usyk wins. But the judging on this is some of the best and cleanest judging we've had for a big fight in a while. No weird split decisions, accurate scoring. As I was watching, I scored it about 7-5, but I purposefully gave Fury a round that I didn't think he won, and I think I gave him another one that I think he didn't really win either, or that was close and could have gone either way. So really the real score is about 8-4 on my scorecard, and both judges, not both, all three judges scored it 116, 112, 8-4. So great scoring, and that wasn't an issue. So there was some scoring issues earlier in the night, but that's a whole separate thing, you know. Cleaner shots and hard shots. I remember talking about the Beterbiev Bivol fight, and I was doing a breakdown, and I was at this point where there was a dilemma where you would have Beterbiev throw a shot and Bivol has his guard up, but the shot rips through his guard and knocks Bivol's head back, right? And then in another instance, you would have Bivol catching Beterbiev with a clean shot right on the chin, but Beterbiev just kind of eats it. And that was hard for me to kind of distinguish which shot should I favor more, the harder shot or the cleaner shot. And I said the harder shot, but there's a good middle ground there. And the middle ground is, and this is going to be relevant to Fury versus Usyk, because this applies to scoring this fight, even though it's not even close enough to really matter that much, but to some people's eyes it is. When it comes to choosing a harder or cleaner shot, the cleaner shot should always be chosen if there's no substantial difference in like the visible impact of a punch. So if two people both throw punches and both of their heads get knocked back, the cleaner shot, the one that doesn't have to go through a guard or the one that lands right on the chin, that shot is the better shot. So cleanness is first and foremost. But if there's a big difference in visible power, even if a shot has to go through a guard, if there's a visible difference, like one shot hits clean but it like barely moves them, and one shot goes through the guard but blasts their head back and they kind of stumble backwards, it's obvious which shot is the better shot there, even if it's less clean. Now, Usyk consistently landed the cleaner shots in both fights. And this is why it's, kind of in line with Beterbiev Bivol, although Beterbiev Bivol was much closer. Beterbiev Bivol is much closer than Usyk versus Fury. But Usyk is fighting out of a high guard, so if Fury's connecting, it's likely gonna either get partially blocked or have to go through the block of Usyk's high guard, or sometimes he can get through it or underneath it or around it. But a lot of times the shots aren't going to be as clean. But since Fury is 280 pounds and Usyk is 230, those shots are going to be heavy. And so when Fury's hitting Usyk is shifting, and sometimes he's just hitting them on the shoulders. But if somebody's 50 pounds heavier and they're hitting you on the arms, it's going to shift your whole body anyways. And so from the human judge's perspective, from our perspective, we see the impact, and that catches the eye. But the cleanness of Usyk doesn't catch the eye as much sometimes because he's not hitting as hard as Fury. But at the same time, when it comes to power, the cleanness and the accuracy is probably even more important than the just force behind the punch. But that's a whole separate conversation. In this fight, the second one, Fury looked better in spurts in this second fight than he did in the first. Like when he was putting everything together, there were times where I was like, okay, maybe he is going to bring a different level to this. And to me, like this is what was on the line for Usyk. Almost nothing was on the line, because the way I looked at it, unless Fury just completely outclassed him and outboxed him, I was expecting if Fury was gonna win this, you'd have to like batter him, beat the hell out of him, knock him out, or just like break him down. So for me, if Usyk were to lose this fight, it wouldn't really do much to him. It would just make him look more human. But I already had Usyk in the conversation of, you know, some of the greatest. We'll talk more about that, especially later on when we talk about legacy and stuff like that. So for Usyk, win or lose, I kind of already knew what he was, where he was, how good and great he was. I've given him a lot of praise in the past, talking about the top 3 pound for pound and why he has a good argument for being number 1 pound for pound over Naoya Inoue and Terrence Crawford. But I think there's a good argument for all 3, depending on how you feel on a given day or what you look for. For Fury, on the other hand, oof. I'm trying to think of the most diplomatic way to say it, but I won't be diplomatic. Fury, and a lot of people say this, so it's not a crazy thing to say. I've always looked at Fury as overrated in many aspects, underrated in many others, but probably more overrated in more aspects than he is underrated in those others. Fury had a lot more to prove. First of all, he lost. So if he were going to lose again, that would just prove that he's not a better fighter than Usyk, which that's a big deal. Second thing is, there's this era of heavyweights has always been, for some reason, praised for being so big. It's like, oh, they're so much bigger than the heavyweights in the 90s and the 80s. That's why they would beat them. It's like, oh, have you heard of something called skill and athleticism? Because a lot of these heavyweights, they're not that athletic, right? Fury and Wilder and Joshua and, you know, Parker and Usyk, exceptions, right? And that's why they're at the top. They have greater skill than the rest of these big guys, but they're also just better athletes as well. Fury dominated the era of the big, slow, less athletic giants, and a lot of people were impressed by that. And to a certain extent, they should be, because, like, you know, beating Vladimir Klitschko, that's a big deal. The first loss in a long time up until that point. And having the skills that he has, having the smoothness that he had in his younger days. He's not really as smooth, like, you know, when he came back. But it's not that Fury isn't. I guess it kind of depends on which Fury we're talking about, but maybe a younger Fury could be potentially, you know, a elite fighter in any of the heavyweight eras. But this Fury, that's the problem, right? When I made the Francis Ngannou video after that performance, and I was like, Usyk will wash him, because I was so convinced for a long time that Usyk would just wash Fury, because I just didn't see how Fury was close to being a better boxer than Usyk in like any regard. I could see how Fury was more dangerous than Usyk, which is why I ended up picking Fury later down the line. But this Fury that we have now, he's just not on that level. To me, these two performances from Usyk have proven that this Fury that we're seeing now just isn't on the level of the greats. Now, maybe a younger Fury, you can make an argument. I haven't seen enough of the younger Fury to eye test him and kind of configure how he would look versus some real, you know, elite competition from other eras. But like, just if you ever look at heavyweights from the 90s, the speed, the technique, the skill, the jabs, the footwork, the athleticism, it's just like a different level. It's a different level. A decent heavyweight from the 90s is a problem today, and that's just from the 90s. let alone the 80s and Muhammad Ali fought some killers and stuff like that where they were just different level of dog. But yeah, this era is also simultaneously it's the reason why Fury is so successful, other than Fury being a good fighter, which he is, of course. But it's also the reason why you kind of got to hold Usyk back, because a lot of people are like, Usyk is the GOAT, he's the greatest of all time. Stop. That's nope. Ridiculous. Usyk is one of the greatest of all time. If there's like a lot more than, there's several people ahead of him on that list in terms of heavyweights alone. But yeah, I think, but when I look at Usyk, what I see is someone that can compete in any of those eras and potentially be a champion in any of those eras without question. But I'm kind of like losing where I'm going there. But Fury had a lot to prove, because if he were going to go in there and stop Usyk, that would have kind of cemented to me that, okay, he's a lot better than I give him credit for, and he's also is going to be in that same list with Usyk. But Usyk is absolutely in that list, because you got to think about it. Fury isn't aging so gracefully. Usyk is. That's a part of greatness, being able to age gracefully. That's not like a massive part, but if you age gracefully, like George Foreman coming back with his old ass and winning the heavyweight title, that's a massive accomplishment, and that further cemented his greatness, right? So being able to be successful at an older age tells you a lot about that person's skill, a lot about that person's physical ability, a lot about that person's mind. And so for Usyk, it just further cemented him. For Fury, that just gave me more reasons to kind of doubt some of his legitimacy. I don't want to make it seem like how most boxing social media people in the space out there, like, Fury is just trash, he's so overrated, he can't do this. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying he's not on the same level as Usyk, and I don't think that should be controversial to say, considering that he just lost 2 clean fights to Usyk. Those clean L's. They were competitive. There's a difference between competitive and close. Those fights weren't really that close. They were competitive, and a lot of times the more competitive a fight is, the closer it is, and in order to be close, it has to be competitive. But they were fun to watch. They were competitive, but when I'm watching those fights, I'm like, Usyk is a different level than Fury. Not like a way different level, but a different level. Yeah. Let's see. I'm talking about old heavyweights. Oh, Usyk's crazy gas tank. I was in that first round when they came out with that pace. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Usyk versus Anthony Joshua 1, because going into that fight, I just knew that fight was going to be one of my favorite fight of the year, like my number 1 fight. But Fury Wilder 3 was the same year, and it was like, never mind. But when that first round, when you see Usyk just the pace that he puts on with feints, it is insane. A 6'3", 230-pound man doing all of this shit for 36 minutes is it's a different level, and that's why AJ got drowned, right? That's drowning almost anybody reasonable that's human. And him and Fury come out in that first round, and Usyk is setting a crazy pace. I'm like, oh shit, this fight might get wild. And the Fury's kind of like answering back. He's kind of doing his little twitches, but Usyk kept up a crazy pace for the entire fight. I think this pace was even crazier than how it was in the first fight. I think Usyk really wanted to drown Fury. I think Usyk definitely was trying to hurt him even more so than in the first fight, because I think he saw that the level change was working, and he knew that if he landed that left hand perfectly with the right timing and the right placement, he could hurt him, because that's what he did last time. And so he came into this fight with that mindset, and you could see it with how he approached the fight. And yeah, his cardio was off the charts. But I think that's where we will end talking about Usyk versus Fury. But it's not too, the next topic isn't too disparate from, you know, that, because we're talking about legacy, we're talking about greatness. And I was just mentioning this with Fury, talking about how the polarization of opinions is so extreme, such that you either think Fury is the most overrated fighter of all time, and he's dog shit, and he's trash, and he can't even be mentioned in the conversation with other great fighters, so on and so forth. And he's like a cheat and all. He does have some cheating in his past. That's just objective. But you think he's like, has like magical cheat codes every time, so on and so forth, whatever. Or you think he could like crush Muhammad Ali, and he would do this to Mike Tyson and that to any other heavyweight that you put your name for. So there's always extreme polarization, which is kind of stemming from some reactiveness, but we'll get a little bit further into that. And two people that I always talk about to kind of exemplify that phenomenon are Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather, because they suffer from the same thing but to a greater degree, where people like say, no, he's the best of all time, or they say he's the most overrated trash fighter of all time. He gifted decisions, or he could never be anybody great, and blah blah blah, so on and so forth, you know. And then the third fighter that I'm adding to that, but not for the same reason, is Jon Jones, because I was thinking about this way back when he fought Stipe Miocic, and there's a lot about Tom Aspinall, but let me stop dancing around and get into the nitty gritty. But the topic is less about Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather, and it's more about the reactionary kind of foundation upon which the conversations on greatness are held. It always is something like fans of a fighter will do what they do, which is give a lot of praise to the fighter, maybe too much praise, sometimes too much praise, and they'll end up, you know, overstepping, right? But then the reaction from people is to overstep in the other direction and say, no, now they're completely trash. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And Mike Tyson is a kind of relevant example because of the stuff that he's been up to with his crazy ass. But Mike, a very special fighter, very special talent, lifestyle choices, you know, impacted his ability to fully, you know, live up to his potential. But along the way, before he, you know, crashed out, he had some great victories that in general became underrated because people started to feel that he was overrated, and so they started to downplay some of his earlier victories, like Trevor Berbick and stuff like that, like names that and that's one of the problems with the way that we think about boxing, because we think about boxing on a name basis, meaning that if we don't know the fighter, we just automatically assume it's not worthy of giving respect towards beating that fighter. But that doesn't make any sense. And you know, Roy Jones has that line that people say he fought nobody, but he just made him look like nobody. And a lot of times great fighters will suffer from that. Terrence Crawford suffered from that because he beat some tough fighters like Mean Machine that, you know, just don't get mentioned. And Naoya Inoue beat some tough fighters that just don't get mentioned, and Usyk beat some tough fighters that just don't get mentioned. So it's a transcendent thing that comes along with greatness. The greater you are, the more people will like kind of overlook a lot of what you do, because you're kind of put on this pedestal, and everything that you did to climb to the top of that pedestal is kind of ignored because they're just focused on where you ended up, and they don't really think about how you got there. And they definitely don't think about how your opponents got to the position of fighting you, which normally means those opponents are also quite good indeed. Floyd is kind of in a similar situation but he kind of he did a lot to help put himself in that situation with the way that he built his brand. But Floyd is one of the most spectacular fighters you can ever watch, in my opinion, especially if you know what to look for. But besides watching the eye test, he also has like a laundry list of greats that he beat prior to even becoming Money Mayweather, which that's where like most of the hate comes for Money Mayweather. And the problem with how greatness gets treated is that truth that kind of takes away from a fighter is overshadowed, and truth that adds to a fighter's legacy is overshadowed. So you get the worst of both worlds, because the reactionary communities are kind of like warring with each other, and it muddies the waters on really what is. So Floyd definitely, especially towards the end of his career, was pulling some weird stuff in terms of choosing who to fight and not who to fight. Mike Tyson, towards the end of his career, definitely wasn't a great fighter, and every time he was fighting great fighters, he was losing. But at the same time, there's nuance in that, because if you want to acknowledge the bad, you have to acknowledge the good. In other parts of their career, they were monsters. They really were as great as they were praised to be, to a certain extent. But for Floyd, to a greater extent. For Mike, we still, there was a lot of questions that we never will ever get the answer to. But still, there's the extreme reactions of haters and fans overshadow kind of some of the truths that are in the middle, some of the truths that are nice and some of the truths that are not so nice. And that's one of the problems with judging modern day legacies. But when we talk about Jon Jones, because in a sense he's a Floyd Mayweather of the UFC, in a sense, or you can compare him to some other greats. But when we talk about legacy, one of the most important things that goes in tandem with greatness that doesn't often get discussed doesn't get discussed as often as I feel it should, rather. I guess I should say that. One of the things is greatness requires a little bit of insanity, a little bit of delusion. It requires you to do stuff that other people just aren't willing to do, or that other people think is insane and would never try. With Jon Jones, obviously, an amazing fighter. I want to say it's inarguable that he's the GOAT, but he has some of his own controversies that may take away from that. And I don't know. There's a lot that could go into that UFC GOAT conversation, but we won't go there. Jon is in a very interesting position. He's like in a Canelo position with Canelo and David Benavidez, where people will defend, an already great fighter that's towards the latter part of their career, and they're kind of making fights that they want to fight, that they want to make just because that's what they want to do, whether it's money fights or just fun fights, whatever. And that's what Jon Jones pulled with Stipe Miocic. It was a good fight for him because it was going to be money, and it was going to be a defense, and it was going to be easy, and that's exactly what it was. But I think people have this idea. This is another important thing about greatness. People have this idea that, like, once you're great, it's just like, oh, I'm great, I can do whatever I want. It's like, but that's the difference between being great and one of the greatest of all time. Because the greatest of all time they don't stop at being great. They do more crazy stuff even when they don't have to and probably should not. For example, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was already great and he was already established as who he was, but what made him, or one of the big things that pushed him over the edge and becoming the GOAT, was coming back and doing something that nobody thought he should be doing, which is fighting George Foreman. Being old, out of your prime, not even close to your prime, coming and fighting the monster that people were saying was going to kill him, and because he ran through all of Muhammad Ali's former opponents, and so, you know, but winning that fight is one of the most prized achievements in all of sports, not combat sports, in all of sports. That victory is one of the most, it's one of the greatest victories in all of sports, right? And it's because he did what he wasn't supposed to do, right? So for me, Jon Jones is at that fork in the road of his career where he can choose to, I've done enough. I don't have to do anything difficult anymore. I'm already great. I'm already this, and that. And to be fair, that's an acceptable choice. An acceptable choice is to say, I don't feel like doing it anymore. Like, I won't, you know, hate the boy unless he fights Alex Pereira. Then, yeah, that would be crazy. But hopefully that does not happen. But like people like Jones has said this himself. He said, if he beats, or rather, he's saying, beating Aspinall wouldn't do anything for him. He's like, what would that do for me? What would that do for me? And it's like, that would be one of the craziest victories of all time, because to move up to heavyweight, right? You're smaller, fighting bigger guys. Like he had that beard, he had that dad gut, you know, when he moved up at first. So he had to put on size, and you know, but to move up to heavyweight, to be much older, right? And to be smaller, to fight a guy like Tom who has smoked half of the top 10, there's no question that Jon Jones would be the GOAT after that. There's no question. The only question would just be how much further ahead is he than everyone else, because that's a crazy feat. For the same reason that Muhammad Ali beating George Foreman is a crazy feat, or for a similar reason that George Foreman coming back and winning the heavyweight championship at his age is a crazy feat. It's because the greatest feats are the ones that no one even entertains the possibility of occurring. And then to kind of like round out this conversation, if also, it's the same way I feel about Canelo when he was, you know, doing his thing with Benavidez, but this is how I feel about any champion. If you have the belts, either surrender them or defend them. Ilia Topuria is like in a weird situation right now where he's like, I want to move up to 155, and it's like, okay, sure, but drop your belt. Well, you want to move up to 155 and get a title shot, that's a whole separate thing. But if you want to move up a weight class, sure, drop your belt. But then he's like, I don't want to drop my belt. It's like, well, that's weird, because you got to defend your belt. Same thing with Jon Jones. If there's an interim champion, it doesn't get any more clear than that who you should be fighting next. And if you're not fighting that person next, then you shouldn't have a belt. Simple. Yeah. Let's get to the final topic, which is one unrelated to fighting, or at least unrelated to fighters. I think the best of my analyses are some of the best pieces of fight analysis on YouTube, in my opinion. Of course, I would think my own content is good, but regardless, after a while, I kind of, to put it simply, just didn't want to do it. A lot of work, a lot of energy, and when I'm doing other stuff, it becomes inconsistent, and that's the worst part to me. I'm fine with investing the energy and the work, but when I do it inconsistently, then it's like it's not fair to the audience. And so, you know, the end of this podcast is about me retiring from analysis and probably not doing any more of that, at least for a while. It might come back in the future depending on what happens in the next couple years. But yeah, analysis requires a lot of work just to make short videos, honestly. But yeah, and since I was so inconsistent, it just didn't feel right, you know, focusing on that and then not doing much with it. So I did name this channel Fight Science Philosophy. So the science will still be discussed, but we'll just lean into the philosophy and you know, discussion part, which we already have a lot of. And in my opinion, that's some of my best content, where I sit back and discuss, especially like when I write stuff down instead of just, you know, going off the top of my head like I'll do on this podcast. But yeah, this channel will still go on, still will have content, but I probably won't do any analyses unless the only exception to that rule, it's not, I guess it's not a real retirement, it's like I don't know, kind of like frozen. But the only exception to that rule is like if I really want to analyze something, and if I really have the time and the desire and stuff like that. But I just don't like being inconsistent with the content. And yeah, I feel guilty being inconsistent with the content, and so I just rather not do it at all, rather than, you know, promise stuff that I can't or don't want to deliver after a while. So that's my official retirement from retirement. That's my, you know, walk away from analysis, but not real retirement, because there is a possibility I could do some analysis here and there. But then also it's like trying to start a Patreon to do all that. It's like I don't want to do all that. I made YouTube videos for the fun, and yeah, for the fun and for the interaction, and I don't want to do any other stuff and make it too much like a business or a job. And so yeah, that's the end of that, and I will talk to y'all next time. Be on the lookout.